thank you all for being here today to talk about student loan debt. I want to start by thanking my partner in the House Majority Whip, Jim Clyburn, who has worked on the student loan debt issue for many, many years. And we have now put together a proposal that would significantly reduce student loan debt for millions of people across this country. Student loan debt in this nation has reached crisis proportions. 45 million Americans are dealing with student loan debt. You know, they really get caught in an America that says you need a post-high school education to get a ticket into America's middle class, a chance to build something going forward. But the cost of that education has shot through the roof and you're pretty much on your own. The position of our federal government, by and large, has been to say, not to worry, we will simply lend you the money with interest. So that now an entire generation has been burdened with about $1.5 trillion in student loan debt. This hits people of color the hardest. We know, for example, from the data that African American students are more likely to have to borrow money to go to college, likely to borrow more money while they're in college, and likely to have a harder time paying their student loan debts when they get out of college. In fact, the average black student loan borrower owes more money 12 years after graduation than he or she did at the time they left school. You know, this is crushing an entire generation. It crushes our leadership. It further divides our country, in effect saying if you're lucky enough to be born into families that can write a check for tuition, you're on one path, and for everyone else, you're just going to get loaded under a pile of debt. That debt not only affects the people who try to carry it, it affects our entire economy. I make this pitch every chance I get. Whether you know someone who has student loan debt or love someone who has student loan debt or not, you should care about reducing the student loan debt burden. Because today, what's happening is that young people with student loan debt are not moving out of their parents' homes, as we would expect. They're not buying homes, their own homes, as we would expect. They don't start their own businesses. It is a drag on our entire economy. Finding a way to cancel a big chunk of that student loan debt means freeing up young people to do more, to buy more, and to start their own businesses, and a real shot to our economy. So, what the congressman and I have proposed is that we tackle the student loan debt crisis head on. We have proposed the Student Loan Debt Relief Act, and it would be debt cancellation for up to $50,000 for 42 million Americans. And for people who still have some loans outstanding after that, it would reduce the interest rates on those loans. The effect it would have on our economy would be felt immediately. And one place it would be felt would be in the racial wealth gap in this country. As everyone in this room knows, there is a black-white wealth gap in America that has been persistent and growing. The day our bill gets signed into law, that black-white wealth gap shrinks. That means that African American families are moving closer to white families in terms of their overall financial picture. Across the population, it would shrink by about 4 points. For people with student loan debt, when this bill goes into law, the black-white wealth gap would shrink by about 25 points. That is a significant difference that we have not seen in this country. For me, this is personal. The first bill I ever introduced in the United States Senate was to try to cut the interest rate on student loans. Back then, it was a pretty far out position. The number of co-sponsors I could get in the United States Senate was a nice round number, 0. But I thought it was the right fight to have, because I'm a kid whose daddy ended up as a janitor, but who had a dream to be a public school teacher. You don't get to do that if you can't do 4 years of college. My family didn't have the money for college, and like a lot of people, I have a twisty-turny story around this, but ultimately my opportunity was what was then a commuter college that cost $50 a semester. And so a price that I could pay for on a part-time waitressing job gave me the opportunity to finish a 4-year diploma and become a special needs teacher. That opportunity is just not out there today. And the signs of it not being out there is how many people are carrying so much debt in this country. We're in the fight to turn that back around and to say America should be a country of opportunity, not just for those born into privilege, but for everyone. And so I am delighted to be here today with Congressman Clyburn to fight this fight. Congressman?
Thank you very much, Senator Warren. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Thank you very, very much. We're going to hear from two young people with their personal stories, but let me share just a short personal story for me. I represent South Carolina's 6th Congressional District. In my congressional district are 7 HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. There are 8 in the state, but 7 of them are in my congressional district. I'm a graduate of one of them, South Carolina State University. Of course, when I graduated some 50-odd years ago, it was South Carolina State College. 20 years ago, the state of South Carolina contributed 45% of that school's budget. Today, it is 24%. So if you were to look at what has happened to student loans, student assistance in that time, you know what the burden is for young people graduate. Over 90% of the students at the HBCUs in my congressional district are getting some loan, Pell Grants, student loans, or a combination thereof. And when they graduate, and as you just heard, they graduate with big debt. But it seems as if the longer they're in the workforce, the greater that debt becomes. I am pleased to be here today to join in the sponsorship of this. I believe very strongly that we have got to arrest this cancer that is growing on the lives of our young people. That must be done, and that's why I'm here today. South Carolina is just one of the 50 states and of the territories that are impacted negatively by this debt. I was shocked when I woke up one morning, picked up a newspaper, and saw that student loan debt had eclipsed credit card debt in the country. That is something that should not be. We look for our secondary grade schools to provide a foundation for our students. And hopefully post-secondary education will be a springboard for them. Today, it seems to be an anchor around their necks when it comes to trying to fulfill their dreams and aspirations. I would close with this. This may be depressing to current holders of this debt. But when you think about a college graduate going out to start a career and a family, the impact on student loan debt goes far beyond that generation. It's passed on to whatever may be the products of that union. And so I'm pleased to be here today to join with Senator Warren and thank her so much for bringing so much attention to this problem. Hopefully, we can do something to arrest it. And with that, I have no idea which one should go first, but
Right
I'll
here.
send it to you.
There we go. Congressman, thank you, Congressman. And now we're going to hear from Ashley Gray.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Gray, and I'm a proud native of St. Louis, Missouri. I'm a PhD student in higher education, leadership and policy studies at Howard University, a historically black university. I stand here today as an advocate for higher education. I stand here as a first-generation college graduate, and I stand here with a massive amount of student loan debt. And no certainty that I'll be able to repay it anytime soon. Like most people, my mother was not able to write a check and ensure my college career. As a result, I've worked throughout my entire collegiate career, different jobs, sometimes taking on multiple appointments at a time to support my college. The massive amount of debt my education has created often casts a shadow on my accomplishments. There's a sort of cognitive dissonance that happens in celebrating this degree and also knowing that I'll have a significant amount of debt to pay once it's completed. Higher education should be a pathway to upward mobility, yet student loan debt feels like a ball and chain around our necks when trying to obtain that upward mobility. And this is why I support the Student Loan Debt Relief Act. I pursued higher education, like many Americans, from working class, marginalized black households, because I really wanted to disrupt generational poverty. I wanted to grow my knowledge base. I wanted to increase access to people who look like me. And this is why I continue in higher education. I've earned degrees in different institutional types, including private, public, and now at a historically black college and university. And with that, as I complete my last degree, and I should be very happy about becoming a doctor, I have a sense of regret because I know that I may not be able to pay this loan debt back. I also know that without loan cancellation, it may impact the ability to one day have a family. It'll impact home ownership. It'll also impact the ability to finance my future children's education. A few months ago, the HBCU Collective organized students, alumni, and supporters to Capitol Hill to meet with members of Congress and ask them to cancel student loan debt. And in my opinion, if Wall Street and wealthy donors or wealthy people can have a tax cut in the amount of $1.5 trillion, why can't everyday Americans? We so desperately need this. The Student Loan Debt Relief Act does that for me, and it can do that, I imagine, for you too. Student loans are plaguing this nation and disproportionately impacting black people, namely black women, when you look at the data. With default rates projected at over 40% by the year 2023, it's imperative that this nation does something to stop the cancer as you described it. This legislation will have a real impact on millions of people, and it'll have a real impact on my life. I'm grateful to Senator Warren and Representative Clyburn. Thank you so much for your attention to this and your passion. And I really call on the American people to also get behind this, as many of us are plagued with this debt, and many of us are going to continue to live through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. And Jorge Brito is going to be our fourth speaker today.
Hello. My name is Jorge Brito. I'm coming here from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My father and my uncles, they all worked blue-collar jobs. And growing up, I had no one to really steer me on how to navigate the student loan process. I was one of the first ones, along with my sisters and my cousins, to attain degrees to go to college. But we heard loud and clear, trust me, that that was what we needed to do. My uncles, my aunts, my father, they pushed that on us to get a degree, to give back, to move forward. When I decided to go to college, though, I didn't have anyone to really walk me through that process. I took out student loans. I didn't really know what it meant. I had a lot of faith in the federal loan program. We were brought up that you trusted the government, you did right, you were treated fairly, and you would pay back those loans. That's what I thought I was signing my papers for. That's what I thought I was taking out those loans for. So I felt sure that one day I'd be earning enough to pay back my student loans. I was fulfilling the dreams of my parents, and I believed that I was being treated fairly, that I would get my shot. After getting my undergrad degree and working for a few years, however, I decided to move to Philadelphia and become a teacher. I went to graduate school for my teaching degree with the intent on working as a teacher in my new home city. When I discovered that the starting salary, however, of what I would be making as a teacher was the same as my day job, I worked as a bike courier in my undergrad and my graduate degree. When I discovered that I was making the same amount of money delivering packages on a bicycle as I would as a first-year teacher, I was pretty disappointed. I felt let down. I felt like I had been betrayed. I simply couldn't afford to teach in the Philadelphia public schools with the amount of student loans that I had and the debt that I was incurring. No job that I could find at that time would allow me to live and to pay my loans. The student loan system really failed me, and I felt that I was not taught how to manage my loans. I'd call my loan servicers every year when I came up for renewal, and they said that I needed to make a payment monthly, and they would just say, well, you can just defer for the year. And I didn't know totally what that meant. So I would defer year after year, get into the cycle while the interest was growing and growing and growing. They never told me about other repayment options. I wasn't taught how to manage my debt properly. The end result, I was left with a lot of stress about my debt. And today, me and my wife combined, we owe a minimum payment of $750 a month. $750 a month is a lot to a young family with a 6-month-old son. We have a beautiful baby boy, and we would love to grow our family. We'd love to add one more maybe. But we can't afford to do that, to live and to pay that debt. If this bill were to pass, we would be able to make other choices. We would be able to make better choices. We could put that money towards our son's education. I'd be able to help take care of my ailing father. We'd be able to save, something that we should be doing, but we can't. If we had that extra money, we'd be able to help our community also. I know I'm only one of millions of people who are being crushed by student debt. The Student Loan Debt Relief Act would be a lifeline. And I thank all the senators and representatives who are working to make it a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Congressman? So we're all here to take some questions. If anyone has any questions. Yes, ma'am.
A couple. One, how is the cost going to be offset for that, for the cost of this? And are there elements in this bill that address the issues that you were talking about student loan servicers, how these loans are granted, how the interest is compounded, and the information that is given to borrowers?
So I'll take the second part and leave the congressman with the part about how to pay for it. But yes, the answer is yes. There are elements in this bill about dealing with student loan servicers. I also should put in a brief commercial to say we need someone who heads up the Department of Education who, instead of being on the side of the student loan servicers, is actually on the side of people trying to repay their student loans, and that would also make a big difference because much of this is left, as you know, to the Department of Education. So it's both halves. It's got some pieces in the bill. It's also about getting a better Secretary of Education. So you want to talk about pay for?
There are many, many ways to approach that issue. I prefer looking at what we did with that $1.5 trillion tax break that we give to multimillionaires, and to cut back on that rate. For instance, we reduced the student of the corporate rate from 34 down to 21%. It has had some dramatic adverse consequences all across the board. My plan would be to move that to 25, which is what Romney advocated for when he first raised the issue of cutting this debt. We've seen affordable housing be jeopardized, not just jeopardized, eliminated because of that 21%. We see churches and charities having taxes that they never had before, all to give wealthy people, extremely wealthy people, $1.5 trillion tax break. That's the way I would propose to pay for it.
Right. And the only point I would add, with great respect, is that the congressman is part of the House leadership and will work through many of the aspects of how to do this. I also think we could, I support this strongly, but I also think we could do this through a wealth tax, a tax on the top 1% of fortunes in this country, those that are more than $50 million, would give us enough money to provide for universal child care, universal pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old, wages of every child care and preschool teacher, provide for tuition-free college, permit us to put $50 billion into historically black colleges and universities to help 43 million Americans. So all I want to say is there are a lot of ways to pay for this. It's a question of our values and the choices we make. We can decide that all of those breaks and all that money ought to stay with the thinnest slice at the top, or when you make it really big, you pitch in a little so everybody else has a chance to build a life. Congressman? Yes.
I wanted to ask about whether this bill does anything for future student debt. In other words, if you forgive the student debt loans for all of the people you said, what about the people that are starting anew? They've been through this. What about the next generation that's coming up that wants to go to college and needs help?
So we've got a bill here for the existing student loan debt. We've got another piece that's about making access to college, technical school, community college, and 4-year college available to all of our kids. It's a separate piece, though. So this one is focused on the people, the 43 million Americans who have student loan debt that would see it canceled by this bill. But you're right, we can't let this problem start again. Yes.
Senator, why did you decide to include income limits on your debt relief? Senators, why not go as far as Senator Sanders and wipe out all debt relief? He said it's important for universal buy-in.
As I pointed out earlier, we have a real problem in this country with the black-white wealth gap. And that black-white wealth gap is the product, in no small part, of decades of official discrimination by our government. Redlining, for example, kept African-American families from buying homes. And the consequence of that, generation after generation after generation, was that while white families built up some wealth, black families were simply denied that opportunity. The same was true with employment discrimination, with other forms of housing discrimination, with educational discrimination, and we still see the impact today. It was very important to the congressman and me that when we devised a student loan debt relief package, that it aim directly at bringing down the black-white wealth gap in America. And the numbers we picked are the numbers that do that best. They give the maximum help to the people who will help close that black-white wealth gap. And that's why we settled there. 43 million Americans, that's 95% of the people who are dealing with student loan debt, will see their debt canceled. And for the first time in decades, we will see the black-white wealth gap for those who have student loan debt shrink significantly. We'll see the overall black-white wealth gap shrink.
Last question?
And let me,
Please.
if I may, on that, I get a little bit concerned when I see attempts being made to address a specific issue, and the attempts get diluted by bringing everybody into the process. If that would solve the problem, we wouldn't need this in the first place. We would never have had redlining if everybody were treated equally. To me, we've created a problem, and we have to address the problem. And I don't think you target addressing that problem by opening the door and says everybody are free to come in, when the segment that was kept out will still have to fall in line with the finite amount of money that goes around. If the money were unlimited, it would be one thing, but it's not.
Time for one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
Senator Warren, I'm also a PhD student with Ashley at Howard University.
Uh-huh.
Currently holding $250,000 as a student loan.
Wow.
And I'm also was a Pathways intern, and most of us are minority students, but we're also kept out of the tuition reimbursement programs that our agencies provide because we're interns. And it seems like such, I guess, it just seems like such an issue that we would have student interns, but we won't subsidize their tuition. Is there anything we can
So
we would have?
that's not this program, but you identify another problem in how we pay for higher ed. What I very much would like to see us do is, at the same time we do student loan debt relief, we make sure this problem doesn't recur by making our public technical schools, our community colleges, and our four-year colleges tuition-free, and making a significant investment in our historically black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions, so that the problem of young people who need help to pay for tuition goes away. And can I add just one more part on this? Because all these pieces fit together, and I'm glad you raised this. One other part we need to be thinking about is not just tuition-free college, it's expanding Pell so that people can afford to cover their commuting expenses, to cover their living expenses, to be able to have a chance to go to the flagship school in their state or the school that specializes in engineering that they're interested in, instead of being limited to one within a 10-minute drive of their homes. I'll also point out, universal child care intersects the same question about education. When we have high-quality universal child care available for all of our children, more mamas will be able, and papas, will be able to go back and finish their education. So there are a lot of pieces here to make this happen. The congressman and I are not looking for just one headline around this. We're looking for all the ways that create real opportunity, not headline opportunity, but real opportunity, and address our students where they are. Address our students who are first generation and not getting help when they come in the front door and end up on paths that land them in debt. This is our chance to change that. And I am deeply grateful to the congressman for taking this first piece on student debt cancellation so that we have a chance to work it through the House. Right now, we're not likely to get a vote in the Senate, but have a chance to work it through the House so we can iron out any kinks and get it ready to go, so that soon, I hope, we have people in the House and the Senate who are interested in passing this, and we have someone in the White House who will sign it into law. This is our opportunity to do that, and I'm very grateful to the congressman for getting this started. This is how change happens. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Let me, I will say this, I was kind of interested in today. Usually we think about student loans, we think about undergraduate. We have two graduates here, professional over here. I've got a daughter who finished her terminal degree a couple years ago, and she's over at the University of South Carolina. And we were talking about something the other day, and I said, well, this is what I think you need to do. And she looked at me and says, the first thing I need to do is pay off this student debt.
Yeah.
This loan I got. I said, yes, your dad is trying to help with that. But we have to keep in mind, and I'm glad Senator Warren talked about headlines versus headway. We're trying to make headway here. And we have to start here, but we won't stop here. Every time I think about this problem, I think about the fight I had several years ago trying to keep a redefinition from setting in on what's a full-time student. Nafio may remember we had this fight. A full-time student, 15 hours. Somebody had the bright idea it ought to be 15 credits, which means that any student come from the Sea Islands that I represent, Watmalaw, so all these islands where Gullah and Geechee are spoken. And sometimes you have to try to, no matter how smart you are, if you don't know how to make the subject and verb agree on that test, you're going to take some remedial courses. So you can take 12 hours for credits and 3 hours for remediation. You would not be eligible for loans because you won't be a full-time student. So we are fighting this on many, many fronts. So we aren't just concentrating on this one area. Please know that I used to be a public school teacher. I started my professional career teaching world history in the Charleston County Public Schools, making $352 a month for 10 months out of the year, 2 months, zero. So I know what it is to try and get started on a teacher education. We must make all education meaningful and beneficial, and we must make student loan debt realistic.
Thank you, Congressman. And Ashley, thank you. Thank you. Good. So I think we're good.
Okay.
You.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. I'm so. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.